His latest album, Thurman's, been out for a while. We've been playing it here on WDHA, and it's always a pleasure to welcome Joe Durso back. Good morning, and thanks for
Good
joining us.
morning. Good morning. Good to be back. Thank you, Jim.
And if it's the middle of January, it's got to be light of day time, Joe. You must be a busy camper right now.
There's so many shows that I've lost count. um, and I think the fact that we're in cold January, having a symbol of a sun and light of day is kind of I don't think we thought about that in the beginning, but it does have a warming effect on our brains now.
You're the president of the Light of Day Foundation. How did you actually get involved with the organization, Joe?
Been there since before day one. Bob Benjamin, who's our founder, was diagnosed with young onset when he was about 38 years old, and he had a little party in Red Bank, New Jersey. Asked everyone to donate money to the Parkinson's Disease Foundation instead of a birthday gift. And Bobby Bandiera's band played, and I hopped up and I did a few songs. And then 2 years later, he called up and said, "Hey, let's put something together at the Stone Pony." So, along with Tony Pellegrossi, who's our executive director and our other co-founder, we put together a show, and that was, I guess, November of 2000, which was Bob's birthday, and we had a slew of folks, Joe Grishecki and Willie Nile, and Bruce showed up at that show, which was great, and it just kept on growing, and never did we think we'd be approaching 25 years coming up next year, and almost 7 million and raise for research, and now playing it all over the world. It was really organic, and for me, the real gift of it was I came from the World Hunger Year world, the Harry Chapin Why Hunger, and I always wondered what it was like in the beginning, because I'm still dear friends with Bill Ayers, and I always would ask, how did this start? I was always curious about it, and then I got to live something very similar without realizing I was living it at the time. And then I looked back and said, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, all right, got it." It was,
You mentioned the Bob's Birthday Bash and the humble beginnings of it, and it has to be staggering. And you just kind of referred to it, to go from that small thing to something. And we had Tony Palagrossi and Glenn Burtnick on recently, and I said to them, it's kind of like the New Jersey version of South by Southwest, the way this has exploded.
it's. I was just saying to a friend of mine that if you buy a combo ticket and then you really work your schedule with our app, you can catch 10, 12, 16 shows over 14 days, and it breaks down to something insane like $10 a show, which, where can you do that? And the talent levels through the roof. I mean, I think we would be even more well known if this was a for-profit music festival, as opposed, I mean, we are, I don't know if this is a proven fact, but we have to be the largest not-for-profit music, charity-driven music festival in the world. I mean, there's no other thing like Light of Day.
It's amazing.
That wasn't our intention. It just happened organically.
Well, you mentioned you've raised nearly $7 million, which is
Yeah.
is quite an accomplishment.
Well, except for Tony, who's a part-time executive director, we're an all-volunteer board and have been, and we're really prudent. I always joke that when songwriters and musicians see my name pop up on the phone, they're hesitant because is he beating me up for Light of Day or Why Hunger, or also I'm involved in some other for-profit endeavor. So and I try and be really good. If I'm going to ask folks for a favor, I try and get them involved in money making things the other 9 months out of the year.
You mentioned Why Hunger and Light of Day, and you are someone who not only talks the talk, but you walk the walk. Where did that commitment to service come from?
I grew up in a household, I've said this before. My mom on Sunday nights would be doing the bills, and I grew up in a house. My dad was a butcher, meat manager at Sloan Supermarket in New York City. So, we were what I always thought was middle class. And when I got older, I realized we're probably definitely more lower middle class, definitely working class. And we were never short on food. So when I would hear the Hungerthons on the radio, it was I couldn't believe people in our area didn't have food. And my mom would sit there writing bills every Sunday night. And that's when I first heard the expression borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, as she was moving money from envelope to envelope. But there was always the charity envelopes. And I think for anyone who's a parent, if you don't think your kids are watching, you don't have to say anything. They're saying it. So that sunk in. And then as I got going in music, for the first 7 years, I started late. I didn't pick up guitar till I was 23, even though I was always a
Wow.
lyricist. I was a baseball player, so and then I really dove in. And for the first 7 years, my blinders are on trying to get a record deal, and that's a big mountain to climb. And when we finally started getting a little bit of notice or good enough is when I met the folks from Why Hunger, and I started getting involved with them. And then 2 years later is when Bob got diagnosed, and we started with Light of Day. And then the realization, I always the thing I always say, in fact, I was saying this the other night, was music started becoming so much more to me when it was, or certainly my music, when it became more than just buy my CD, buy my T-shirt. On these nights, there's all this ripple effect that goes on and on. And I used to hear Harry Chapin talk about that. And now living it for almost 25 years, I've seen it firsthand, different things that have happened. And people will come up to you and say, "Oh, we've put this together." And you're like, "Oh, why?" And they're like, "Oh, because we saw what you did or what your organization did." And you don't think that's going to happen. You're just doing what you think feels good. And also, as a prior altar boy, I don't want to go to hell. So I think so
I was gonna
let me
say,
do as much good as I can.
for me, my dad had gone to Fordham, and I went to Fordham as well. So we've got 8 years plus of Jesuit
Mm,
training and that commitment to service there. So it was kind of,
yes.
hammered into me as a
Uh,
kid.
I
Joe,
was taught by the Dominican nuns for 13 years. So over this last year, since I really 6 months since I released Thurman, there's a song on there called Step Right Up, which is basically working on the boardwalk, which is something I always wanted to do on those little booths. And I always say before I sing the song that the nuns would like take 3 busloads of hormonal teenagers and let us loose in Seaside Heights for 12 hours in June. Like, what the hell were they thinking? But luckily it was kind of before tattoos and before lots of piercings. So it was basically just trying to get beer or meet girls. So,
Joe Durso with us this morning here at 105.5 WDHA. We're talking Light of Day. The show's kicking off this weekend. Light of Day, if you're not familiar with it, is an amazing organization. It raises money and awareness in the battle against Parkinson's disease and some related illnesses. So we had the kickoff weekend Friday and
Mhm.
Saturday, of course, Bob's birthday bash. What do we have coming up?
Well, tonight we got the big all day Sunday is songwriter shows on along the boardwalk, starting at noon, ending at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock tonight. There's also a kids' day at the Stone Pony. Great young talent. I mean, the amount of Jersey talent is insane. I can't believe these kids can do what they do at 12 and 15. I mean, I was still trying to learning how to hit a curveball, play like massive progressions. And then there's also the Cover Me Day at the Wonder Bar, which has a great slew of bands playing there. So yeah, it's and then there's a wrap up. I think at the Berkeley tonight, late at night. So there's 6 or 7 more shows to go. But I'm looking. The McLuhan's one is always really touching because Bob Benjamin, our founder, who's now in a wheelchair and has real hard time communicating verbally as his Parkinson's has progressed. He's always at that one. I mean, he's at the big, he's always at a few, but being at this one is it's really intimate. And towards the end of the night, the crowd will always sing a song with him to him, something I wrote from years ago, and it's a really touching evening. And we're at the point of exhaustion too, so everyone gets pretty emotional, and it's there's more manly "I love yous" on stage than than you could put in a box.
I'm hoping to be able to get to the show at Outpost at the Burbs on the 27th. There's some
Yeah,
great songwriters there, including Danny Bonet and Chris Flynn. Chris, in fact, played with us at Dead Air Friday night
I
at the
heard. I
Silver Ball.
heard.
So he's an amazing guitar player. But that's a really good lineup you have
I'm
that
glad
night.
Denny's involved. I was actually doing a house concert in Brooklyn that she came out and attended. And then she had said, "Hey, I really want to get involved." And I'm like, well, "You just commuted from like Upper Manhattan all the way to Brooklyn. Yes, we'll get you." And I knew she was really talented. And we had met years ago, I think through Richard Barone. We were doing a show in somewhere in Carteret. It was Mike Peters, Robin Wilson from Jim Blossom's Pat Denizio. Um, and of Richard and Mike and myself, and we had met then, and then we kind of always knew each other a little bit. But I'm glad we're getting a chance to work together now.
And then there is one more show that I want to mention. I want listeners to put it on their calendar. It's June 20th. That's a long way off, but it's the Happy Together tour. It'll
Mm.
be at the Count Basie. And I just had a couple of the Cowsills on recently,
Ah.
Bob and Paul, and they're part of this show. And their new album, Joe, is really, really good.
Well, you know what? It's really funny because we expect certain artists, like when Dylan puts out a new record, there's a certain quality, and yet when someone hasn't been in the eye like Dylan, say the Cowsills, and they come up with something good, people are surprised. But talented people who stick at it and work at it, they've never stopped touring. There's no reason not to create great art or good art, solid music that people like. And it was very funny. I first became aware of the Cowsills when I put out my second record, and it was called "The Snow, the Rain, and Yesterday." And a reviewer wrote, um, with a title like that, you may be thinking cow sills, but this is far away from that. And I didn't know what that meant. So I had to, there was no internet at that point to look it up. I don't think maybe the start of it and 30 years ago. And that's how I first got familiar with the cow sills. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know this from, 60s radio.
Sure.
Yeah.
Joe's latest album,
Ah,
Thurman. You
there
can
you go.
get all things Joe Durso online at jdcaravan.com and find out about all things Light of Day on their website, lightofday.org. Joe, thank you so much. Best of luck with the remainder of the Light of Day Festival this year. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for being a great supporter of Light of Day. We really appreciate it. And go dead air.